Groundswell the first time I met Mateo Santos. I was serving legal papers to the city housing authority, and he was chaining himself to their front door to stop an eviction. And when security tried to remove him, he looked at me and said, "You're either with us, or you're part of the problem." I should have walked away. I was there on business criminal justice reform lawyer, court order delivery. Nothing to do with housing activism, but something about the way he said it, the absolute conviction in his voice. The dozen other activists surrounding him with signs that read housing as a human right made me stop. "I'm a lawyer," I said. "Criminal justice reform, not housing." "Then you understand systemic oppression." He was around my age, late 20s Latino, with dark curly hair tied back, wearing a faded community organizing t-shirt, and the kind of tired eyes that came from fighting battles. "Everyone told you run. These evictions are illegal. The city's using code violations as cover to displace low-income families. We've been fighting this for 6 months. If they're illegal, take them to court." We did. The judge dismissed on procedural grounds, said we didn't have standing. His jaw tightened. "So we're taking direct action. Civil disobedience, making it impossible to ignore." Security was getting closer. I made a decision that would change everything. "What's the case number?" "I'll look at the filing." "Why?" "Because if the evictions are actually illegal, there might be an appeal route. And because I've spent 5 years fighting the system that puts people in cages for being poor, housing displacement feeds the same pipeline." I pulled out my phone. "Case number." "Now." He rattled it off. Security arrived, started cutting his chain. Mateo didn't resist one limb, made them carry him. As they dragged him away, he called back. "Isaac Torres, right? I've read about your work, the Rikers reform case. How did you—" "Because I know every lawyer in this city fighting for justice. Call me when you've read the case file." And then he was gone, hauled into a police van with the rest of his group. I stood there on the steps of the housing authority, legal papers in hand, and thought, who the hell was that? But here's what I didn't know then. Mateo Santos wasn't just an activist. He was a community organizer who'd spent 7 years building tenant unions in the Bronx, who'd grown up in public housing and watched his neighbors get displaced one by one, who believed that organizing people was more powerful than any legal strategy, who saw the world in terms of us versus the man lawyers were usually them. And I was about to fall catastrophically in love with him. I spent that night reading the case file. Mateo was right there. Evictions were bullshit. The city was using minor code violations, peeling paint, broken windows, things landlords were supposed to fix, as justification to condemn entire buildings in rent-stabilized neighborhoods. The real reason? Developers wanted the land, displace the tenants, demolish the buildings, build luxury condos. Classic gentrification playbook, and completely illegal under New York housing law. The case had been dismissed because the tenant's legal aid lawyer had filed incorrectly wrong jurisdiction, wrong statute cited. An appeal would work if we could get it filed before the buildings were demolished. I called Mateo at 2 a.m. He answered on the first ring. "Isaac? Isaac? The evictions violate the Rent Stabilization Act of 1969, Section 26 to 511. Your lawyer filed under the wrong statute. I can appeal, but we have 72 hours before the demolition order becomes active." Silence on the line. Then, "You're serious?" "Yes. But I need to meet with the tenants, get affidavits, build the case. Can you arrange that? I can have 50 people ready by morning." "Where?" "Your organizing space, wherever you work out of. South Bronx Community Center, 149th Street, 8 a.m. "I'll be there." "Isaac," his voice softened. "Thank you for giving a damn. Don't thank me yet. We might lose, but we're fighting. That matters." I showed up at the South Bronx Community Center at 7:45 a.m. with my laptop, a stack of legal forms, and coffee from the bodega on the corner. The center was a converted church basement, folding tables, mismatched chairs, walls covered in protest posters and tenant rights information in English and Spanish. Mateo was already there. Setting up, he'd changed from yesterday's protest clothes into clean jeans and a button-down. His curly hair, still tied back but neater. He saw me and smiled a real smile this time. Not the angry activist face from yesterday. "You actually came." I said I would. I set down the coffee. "Brought you this. Figured you probably didn't sleep either." "You figured right?" He took the coffee, our fingers brushing. "How's the crowd about yesterday? I was pretty aggressive. I tend to assume all lawyers are part of the system that oppresses people." "Yeah, I got that." I sat down, started unpacking. "And you're not entirely wrong. Most lawyers are, but some of us are trying to dismantle it from the inside. Is that what you do? Criminal justice reform. I represent people, the system, threw away. Inmates at Rikers who are trapped in pretrial detention because they can't afford bail. Kids who got tried as adults for shit they did at 15. People with mental health issues who belong in treatment. Not cages. I opened my laptop. I got into law because I watched my cousin get sentenced to 10 years for a non-violent drug offense when he needed rehab. The system's broken. I'm trying to break it back. Mateo sat down across from me, and I felt him reassessing. Why housing? This isn't your area. Because you're right. Housing displacement feeds mass incarceration. Evict someone, they lose their job. Can't afford a new place. End up homeless. Homeless people get arrested for existing. Arrested people with no address can't make bail. Cycle continues. I met his eyes. Your fight's the same as mine. Just a different entry point. You really believe that? I do. Now let's save your tenants' homes. By noon, I'd interviewed 32 tenants. Documented code violations the landlord had ignored for years, then suddenly used as justification for condemnation. Collected rent receipts, proving everyone was current on payments. Built an affidavit package that showed a clear pattern of retaliatory displacement. Mateo worked beside me the whole time translating for Spanish-speaking tenants, calming down the angry ones, organizing childcare so parents could focus on interviews. He moved through the community like water, knowing everyone's name, their kids' names, their stories. Not just an organizer part of the fabric of this place. You're good at this, I said during a break. The organizing? Making people feel heard. That's the work. Legal strategies matter, but power comes from people organized and ready to fight. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted. I grew up in these buildings. My mom still lives 3 blocks from here. I've watched them displace families for 15 years, and I got tired of watching, so I learned how to fight back. How'd you get into organizing? Community college. Took a sociology class on social movements. Professor said, if you want to change the world, organize your neighbors. So I did. Started a tenant union in my building when I was 19. 7 years later, I'm doing it full-time. He smiled. Doesn't pay well, but it matters. You ever think about law school? You'd be a terrifying lawyer. I think about it. But lawyers work alone. Organizers build power collectively. I'm better at building than arguing. You could do both, maybe. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Why do you care? About this case? About me? About any of it? You could have walked away yesterday. Because watching you chain yourself to that door, that took courage. And because I've spent 5 years fighting the system, and it's lonely as hell. Nice to meet someone else who gives a damn. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Typical lawyer. Suit. Briefcase. No soul. He smiled. You re-wearing jeans and you bought me bodega coffee and you actually give a shit about tenants. It's disorienting. Good. I'd hate to be predictable. We filed the appeal that afternoon. Emergency motion, stayed the demolition, got a court date for the following week. Walking out of the courthouse, Mateo stopped on the steps. Isaac, can I buy you dinner? Like, actual dinner. Not strategy meetings or legal consultations. Just dinner. My heart did something unexpected. Is this you asking me on a date? Is that okay? I know we just met, and we're working together, but he looked nervous now. The confident organizer replaced by someone uncertain. I've been thinking about you since yesterday, and not just because you're helping with the case. It's more than okay. There's a Puerto Rican place in my neighborhood. Best mofongo in the Bronx. I love mofongo. Good. Because if you didn't, this was never going to work. Dinner was perfect. Small restaurant familiaron, the kind of place where everyone knew Mateo and greeted him in Spanish. We sat in a back booth and talked for 4 hours. About growing up, me in Washi Heights, him in the Bronx. About coming out, he came out at 16 to a Catholic family. I came out at 23, and my parents were confused but supportive. About what we wanted from life, him systemic change. Me, to not die having accomplished nothing. When did you know you wanted to be a lawyer? Mateo asked over flan when my cousin got sentenced. I was 17, sitting in that courtroom, watching the judge give him 10 years like it was nothing. And I thought someone needs to fight this. Someone needs to stand between people and the machine that wants to crush them. I paused. What about you? When did you know you wanted to organize? When they evicted my best friend's family, primera. Ha. Wa. Isaac 12. They'd lived in their apartment for 20 years. Landlord wanted them out, found a bullshit excuse to evict. I watched them pack their whole life into a van and leave. And I thought, this isn't right. Someone should stop this. He smiled sadly. 16 years later, I'm still trying to stop it. You're not trying. You're doing it. We're going to win this case. You think so? I know so. The law's on our side. The facts are on our side. We just need the judge to actually read the filing. And if they don't, then we appeal again and again, until someone listens. I reached across the table, took his hand. Mateo, I don't quit. Ever. These families are going to keep their homes. He looked at our hands, then at me. Are you seeing anyone? No. You? No. Haven't dated seriously in 3 years. Too busy organizing. Too angry. He stopped. Too scared that anyone I dated wouldn't understand the work. Wouldn't get why I chain myself to doors and get arrested and spend 70 hours a week fighting battles everyone says are unwinnable. I get it. Because I do the same thing, just in courtrooms instead of streets. I squeezed his hand. Mateo, can I be honest? Please. I haven't stopped thinking about you since yesterday either. The way you stood up to security, the way you talked about the tenants like they were family, the way you looked at me like I could actually make a difference. I paused. I'd like to see where this goes. If you're interested. I'm interested. He smiled, and it lit up his whole face. But Isaac, you need to know I'm not easy to date. I work insane hours. I get arrested semi-regularly. My phone rings at 2 a.m. with housing emergencies. My life is chaos. My life is court hearings and prison visits and fighting with judges who think poor people deserve to be caged. I think we'll manage. Then yes, let's see where this goes. We left the restaurant and walked through the Bronx in the autumn cold. And Mateo took my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. When we reached the subway station, he kissed me soft and certain and perfect, his hands in my hair, my hands on his waist. I'll see you in court next week, he said when we broke apart. You better be there. I need you to translate for the Spanish-speaking tenants. I'll be there. And Isaac, thank you for fighting for us. Always, we won the case. The judge read the brief, agreed the evictions were illegal, ordered the city to rescind the condemnation and fix the code violations at their expense. 50 families got to keep their homes. Mateo cried in the courtroom. That night, we celebrated at the community center with all the tenants a potluck that turned into a party. Kids running around, music playing, everyone hugging Mateo and thanking me like I'd performed a miracle. You did it, Mateo said, pulling me aside. You saved their homes. We did it. Your organizer got them ready to fight. I just handled the legal partners. Over the next 6 months, we became inseparable. I started working housing cases alongside my criminal justice work. Mateo brought me into more organizing campaigns, tenant unions, anti-gentrification protests, policy fights at city council. We fought together, strategized together, built something bigger than either of us alone could create. We also fell deeply, completely in love. Mateo met my family at Thanksgiving, my parents who thought community organizing was dangerous, but loved how happy he made me. I met his family at Christmas, his mom who hugged me and immediately started asking when we were getting married. His 3 younger siblings who grilled me about my intentions. They like you, Mateo said after walking through the Bronx in December snow. My mom especially. She said, you have good energy. Your mom is terrifying in the best way. She's a social worker. She can read people. He stopped under a streetlight, pulled me close. Isaac, I love you. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was scared. Scared of what? That you'd realize organizing isn't glamorous. That you'd get tired of the late nights and the emergencies and the fact that I'm always fighting something. He looked vulnerable now, all the confidence stripped away. That you'd leave like everyone else who couldn't handle the work. I'm not leaving, because I love you too. And I love the work hours. Yours. All of it. You make me better at what I do. You remind me why I'm fighting. I kissed him there in the snow. We're building something, Mateo, together. And I'm not walking away from that. Promise. Promise. But New York City doesn't care about promises. In March, 8 months into our relationship, the city announced a massive redevelopment plan, the South Bronx Renewal Initiative. 50 blocks of blighted housing condemned, demolished, replaced with mixed-income developments. Translation. Displace 10,000 low-income families. Replace them with luxury apartments. Mateo's mom's building was on the list. We're fighting this, Mateo said the night the announcement dropped. We were at his apartment, him pacing, me reading through the plan on my laptop. This is exactly what we stopped before, but bigger. We organize, we protest, we sue Mateo. I looked up. This plan has city council support, the mayor's backing it. Every major developer in the city is involved. This isn't a case we can win in court. Then we win in the streets. You can't chain yourself to 50 blocks of buildings. Watch me. His voice was hard now. Angry. Isaac, they're trying to displace my entire neighborhood. My mom, my family, everyone I've organized with for 7 years. I'm not rolling over because the fight's too big. I'm not asking you to roll over. I'm saying we need strategy that isn't just direct action. We need coalition building, policy alternatives, political pressure that takes years. These families don't have years, and getting arrested repeatedly doesn't stop the bulldozers. Mateo, I love your passion, but we need to be smart about this. Smart? He stopped pacing, looked at me. Or cautious, because you sound like every other lawyer who wants to play nice with power instead of confronting it. That hurts. I've spent my entire career confronting power. Don't act like I'm the enemy, just because I think strategically. And don't act like organizing is reckless just because it makes you uncomfortable. We were yelling now. The first real fight of our relationship. And it was about the thing we both cared about most: how to fight, how to win, how to protect people the system wanted to crush. I'm not uncomfortable, I'm practical. We can't beat this with protests alone. And we can't beat it with legal briefs alone. Isaac, you don't get it. For you, this is a case. For me, it's my home, my family, my entire community. I can't afford to be practical. I have to fight like our lives depend on it, because they do. Then let me fight with you. Not against you. I stood up, moved closer. Mateo, I'm on your side. Always. But if we're going to win this, we need to work together. Legal strategy and organizing. Not one or the other. He was shaking. No anger or fear or both. What if we can't win? What if the system's too big, too powerful? What if everything I've built for 7 years gets demolished anyway? Then we fight until we can't anymore. And then we build again. I took his hands. But we do it together. Okay? Okay? He pulled me into a hug, holding on tight. I'm sorry for yelling, for saying you were like other lawyers. You're nothing like them. I'm sorry too, for sounding like I didn't believe in direct action. I'm terrified of losing you to this fight, of watching you get hurt or arrested, or you're not losing me. I promise. But promises are easy to make and hard to keep when the city is trying to tear down your world. The next 4 months were war. Mateo organized the biggest tenant coalition the Bronx had ever seen. 3,000 families, 50 buildings, united against displacement. I filed every legal challenge I could think of: environmental review violations, community input requirements, discriminatory impact studies. We worked 16-hour days, fell into bed exhausted, woke up and did it again. We also fought about tactics, about risk, about how much was too much. Mateo got arrested 4 times in 2 months. I bailed him out every time, and every time we'd argue about whether it was worth it. You're going to end up with a record that'll make it impossible to work, I said after the 4th arrest. I don't care about my record. I care about keeping families housed. You can't organize from jail, and I can't organize if I play it safe and we lose anyway. But underneath the arguments was love. Deep, complicated, absolutely committed love. We were partners in the fight, in our lives, in everything. And slowly, incrementally, we started winning. The environmental review got delayed. Community board voted against the plan. Local politicians started backing away. The coalition held. The pressure built. In July, 8 months into the fight, the city announced a compromise: 50% affordable housing in the new development. Current residents given priority for new units, no mass evictions during construction. It wasn't everything we wanted, but it was enough to keep most families housed. Mateo's mom would get to stay. The night the announcement came through, we celebrated at the community center. 3,000 people, music playing, kids dancing, everyone exhausted and victorious. Mateo stood on a table and gave a speech about people power, about refusing to accept displacement, about how organizing works when we fight together. I watched him from the back of the room and thought, this is the man I am going to marry. After the party, we walked to his apartment in the summer heat, both of us dead on our feet, but too happy to care. We won, Mateo said, unlocking his door. Isaac, we actually won. You won. I just helped. We won. Together. He pulled me inside, kissed me against the closed door. I couldn't have done this without you. The legal strategy, the coalition building, all of it. You made this possible. You made me better at what I do. You reminded me that law isn't just courtrooms and briefs. It's people. Organizing. Fighting for each other. Partners. Always. We fell asleep, tangled together in his bed, and I thought about the first time I met him chained to a door, defiant and angry and beautiful. How far we'd come. How much we'd built. Epilogue. 2 years later, summer in the Bronx is loud and hot and alive. I was at the South Bronx Community Center, now co-director alongside Mateo. We'd merged legal services with community organizing tenants, could get legal help and organizing support in the same place. Isaac, Mateo called from his office. Can you look at this eviction case? Family in the new development. Landlords trying to force them out. I walked into his office, the one we shared now. Desks pushed together, walls covered in organizing posters and legal reference books. He was at his computer, glasses on, hair tied back, wearing the community organizing t-shirt I'd gotten him for his birthday. Let me see. I leaned over his shoulder, read the case file. Illegal eviction. I can file by Friday. You're brilliant. Have I mentioned that today? Not since breakfast. I kissed the top of his head. You're pretty brilliant yourself. We make a good team. The best team. 6 months later, on the steps of the same housing authority where we'd met, Mateo proposed, got down on one knee in front of 50 tenant union members, pulled out a ring, and said, Isaac Torres, will you marry me and keep fighting alongside me for the rest of our lives? I said yes, before he finished asking. We got married at the community center, because of course we did. My family brought Dominican food. His family brought Puerto Rican food. 300 community members showed up with signs that said love is organizing and justice for all. During the ceremony, someone's phone rang, an eviction emergency. Mateo looked at me, I looked at him, and we both laughed. Take the call, I said. We've got the rest of our lives. Partners? He asked. Always. We kissed with the whole community watching. 2 people who'd met during a fight and built something that survived every battle after. Organizer and lawyer, activist and advocate. Partners in everything. That's not a bad story. That's not bad at all. Community Center Bulletin Board, September 20th, 2029. Tenant Rights Workshop, this Saturday, led by Isaac Torres, Legal Director, and Mateo Santos, Organizing Director. Know your rights. Build your power. Fight back together. The flyer stays up for 3 months, getting worn at the edges from people taking photos. Below it, someone writes a marker. These 2 met at a protest, and now they remarried and saving the neighborhood. That's the most Bronx love story ever. It is, and they're still fighting, still organizing, still building power together.